Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 280. And this week it is Terri's turn to share something. Terri, are you going to tell me about your feet?
I'm not.
No.
But I meant to say this last time when we recorded the second episode about feet. It's funny because I ran into the episodes that you originally talked about, and I don't remember what I was looking for, but it came up in my feed, and I thought, ooh, I need to go back and listen to these because this is what Daisy was talking about. So I did find them. So Daisy, I'm going to maybe talk about something a little even more bizarre than feet and seasonally a little bit off, but good information for people maybe for their next summer. Uh-huh. Now, this comes from an episode of a podcast called Chasing Life.
Well, that's a new one, isn't it, to us?
Yeah. The host is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and he is a leading neurosurgeon in the U.S. At one point was asked to be the Surgeon General and withdrew his name from being considered. But, pretty smart guy. He says that he does this podcast because, sometimes he just finds himself thinking about these kind of weird questions and random health questions and starts going down this rabbit hole and then wonders, am I the only one in the world that thinks like this?
Excellent.
And then,
probably not.
Probably not, because then he gets these questions from people. So I enjoyed this episode of this podcast because this is a question I have asked many times, but I never really did the research on it. So he does have a co-host who kind of helps navigate the pulling in the question. And so she says, well, first we have a caller from San Francisco, and he wrote this question and said, I'm a total mosquito magnet in a group of friends.
Oh, so am I.
I'm getting a dozen bites. Friends are only getting 1 or 2. I'm using mosquito repellent. It's hardly helping. What else can I do besides staying outside? Now, the reason this interests me and why I have gone down this rabbit hole in my head and have had many discussions about it is I am a mosquito magnet. I actually joke about it. When I am standing outside with people and we notice mosquitoes, I say, oh, if you don't want to get bitten, just stand next to me because they will all bite me. And it really does work that way.
So don't fly with me.
No, definitely do
but
not.
But use me as the mosquito magnet.
Do not travel to an airport or on an airplane with me. But yes.
Unless it's populated by mosquitoes.
Stand next to me. If we're in the Nile, you want to be right next to me. We have gotten there on separate planes. And our travel plans never crossed, but we are now in a mosquito-infested area. So when I bring this up with people kind of joke about it. And they're like, oh, it's because you're so sweet. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And part of my explanation is right, but there are other things that are right as well. So first of all, mosquitoes are attracted to the carbon dioxide that we exhale. Now, guess what, folks? I don't breathe differently probably than any of my friends. So it's not that. We're all attractive to them for that reason. But there are plenty of studies that show when we're breathing out, especially when you're in a large group, that we will be attractive to mosquitoes. So in body heat, add in sweat, that these things also seem to play a role as well. So maybe it's that I'm a little hotter temperature than others and they can smell my carbon dioxide more. But because, again, he says, look, we all breathe out carbon dioxide, but some of us do have higher levels of carboxylic, I can't even say it properly, acid on our skin. So think of that as your skin's natural moisturizer. And so it is possible that maybe I get more bites because I have a little bit higher level of this. Another one, this is the one that I already had heard before, and I felt quite vindicated that I was right, is that your blood type may matter. People with type O blood have been found to get bitten significantly more than those with type A or type B.
Well, not me. I'm A+, and I get bitten like crazy.
All right. Well, there are some other explanations, but I don't know what one might apply to you yet. Mosquitoes also prefer darker colors, particularly red, orange, and black. So any clothing that we wear that are these colors are a little bit more attractive. So maybe my friends are wearing pastels and just not quite as attractive. I don't know. But it's also part of why mosquitoes are attracted to, I would say, Caucasian skin. I don't know about other colors of skin, but in Caucasian skin, the red and pink tones in it are attractive to them.
Okay.
Now, he describes this as potential buzz kill, get it? For some people listening, but that studies have found that alcohol, especially beer drinking, can make people more attractive to mosquitoes as well. So if you're outside breathing heavily, exhaling a lot of carbon dioxide, you've been sweating, you have a lot of body heat, you're wearing darker colors, if you have type O blood, and if you're drinking beer, you're probably going to be a mosquito magnet. So again, some of these things we can control. You can wear different colors. You can maybe try to work up less of a sweat, but some of them you just can't control. He then talks about the idea that he does believe that we shouldn't just avoid being outside because there are lots of health benefits to getting outside. And so then this kind of brings up the next question about mosquitoes, and that is, when is it best for me to be outside or best for me to avoid being outside related to mosquitoes? So people had written in the question of, is there a better time of day to be outside if you're trying to avoid mosquitoes? Dr. Gupta said, basically, the short answer is yes. There is a better time of day, but there's a bit of a nuance to this. And partly it's because of different breeds of mosquitoes, which I did not know there were different breeds of mosquitoes. See the things you learn listening to podcasts. But certain mosquito species are more active during certain times of day, specifically active at dawn and dusk, which is why, that's sometimes when we're outside socializing, dusk. He talked about in the US, there are some towns or municipalities who actually put out some voluntary curfews trying to curb people socializing during those hours because some of the mosquitoes do pass along some illnesses and things. And so we don't want a ton of people out during those times, just increasing this rate. So for example, in 2005, 2012, 2019, it's interesting, there's a 7-year pattern to this, but some towns in Massachusetts and Connecticut had large outbreaks of Eastern equine encephalitis. So they asked residents to curb outdoor activities at certain times of the day, just to kind of try and curb those responses. He also talked about the fact that in general, many mosquitoes tend to avoid the sun, which is why we don't tend to see them quite as much during the middle of the day. So during those times, they have sought out shaded areas. So where do some of us get a lot of our mosquito bites? While we're walking in the forest or other shaded areas. So I thought this was interesting. I'm going to start only walking out in the bright sunlight now. Certain species of mosquitoes also prefer warmer climates, but are actually spreading into cooler climates. So we're seeing some spreading of diseases like Zika and different things to different areas than where we traditionally knew them. And again, some of those mosquitoes are some of those that tend to bite primarily from dusk to dawn. So he again started to kind of describe some about the specifics of where and when and how. And he said, it might be important for me also to tell you a little bit about why mosquitoes bite in the first place. I thought, yes, Dr. Gupta, this is a must-know piece of information.
Definitely.
So female mosquitoes are the ones that bite. and they bite to seek out blood for protein to lay their eggs. And they are more aggressive when they are thirsty and have become dehydrated. So there was a study from the University of Cincinnati that found that female mosquitoes were biting more during times of dehydration and drought. And he said, to give you some context, normally around 5 to 10% of female mosquitoes in a population will feed at any given time. But in this study that mimicked dry conditions, limiting access to water, higher temperatures, dehydration, in those situations, it prompted as many as 30% of female mosquitoes to be biting.
A lot more.
So a pretty significant increase just by changing those environmental factors.
How does that go with? Because I always thought that one of the danger areas and one of the things to avoid if you don't want to have a lot of mosquitoes around, is standing water.
He did not go into that, but this is my hunch. Because they are coming to that standing water, because they are dry and dehydrated, and you're standing there. And though they are getting the hydration,
that makes sense.
They're also getting,
and they're hanging around that area.
Yeah, they're also getting easy food because you're standing right near.
So put some standing water right down the other end of your garden.
There you go. Keep
Maybe
it
that'll work.
far away from where you're going to be standing on your deck.
Or encourage predators. I have a frog that lives out with my standing water that's actually outside my bedroom window, but I think the frog eats the mosquito larvae.
Mm-hmm. Something else he did say about this part that I thought was interesting, because again, if you go back to some of the mosquito things you hear about, like the West Nile and things, okay, these are dry areas, right? Or desert areas. Shouldn't there be more biting there? And not necessarily. It's more when you see a drop in the usual level of water. So,
because they need that as habitat, don't they? They need moist conditions as habitat. So you're not going to get as many mosquitoes in the first place in a desert.
That's right. But let's take, for example, I live in Colorado. It's been a very, very dry summer. If they are used to having a certain degree of hydration and that drops, probably got more vicious mosquito bites this year.
Let's go and eat Terri.
That's right. That's right. Because she's wearing red and sweating and has O positive blood, but she's not drinking beer.
That's what you need to do. You need to chuck beer on people who are standing around you.
I should just stand by people who are drinking beer and see if it will bite them instead. So again, dusk and dawn, times when bites are more problematic, but also what's happening in terms of the weather and the climate around you. The final big question he brings in is, okay, so if you are a mosquito magnet, you might be wondering, what's the most effective repellent out there? How can I avoid getting as many bites? I have to say, from my long history of being a mosquito magnet, I feel like so far for me, it hasn't really mattered that much what I do as far as repellent. I feel like I still get a lot of bites. And again, I am the human mosquito repellents. Just stand next to me. So some of you may know, and Daisy, I know you know this, I tend to be kind of interested in alternative medication type things and alternative approaches to things. So I am someone who believes in the citronella candles and the, more natural things that you can put on your body to kind of deter the mosquitoes. And even what I use to treat my mosquito bites, I try to use very natural things. But he did bring up probably things that I have worked pretty hard to avoid and, tries to kind of dispel some of the concerns about them. But what is the best mosquito repellent and something that's actually safe and that works? I am that person who went to Nicaragua with all of those stretchy bands on my wrists and ankles the whole time. And I really didn't get that many bites. But anyway, he talked about 2 insect repellents and products like DEET or picaridin that both have been found effective and both are good choices. There are some slight differences. DEET was developed in the 1940s. It was used to protect army soldiers and eventually spread to the general public in the 1950s. So it has a really long track record. I have heard even recently, though, that you still should be mindful about not wearing it directly on your skin, but wearing it on your clothes.
Okay.
But one of the concerns with DEET is that it has a very strong odor. And there are warnings that DEET can damage plastics as well as certain fabrics. So that may be a concern. So picaridin, on the other hand, was approved more recently. Recently, it's 2005. It's odorless and it doesn't damage any materials. Both have supposedly been found safe and effective. Some studies suggest that picaridin is as effective as DEET, but should be used in higher concentrations than DEET. Other studies again show that they are about equal as far as effectiveness. And then I did a little searching around on the internet afterward and just talking about, safe for pregnant women, safe for young children and things. And so far, what they report does show that they're safe. They also talk about like the percentage of the chemical in the product. And he said, really, that's not necessarily important, except that it is an indicator of how long the protection will last.
Okay.
But he cautioned that even in DEET, if you get something that is over 50%, you're really not going to gain any more benefit with a higher concentration. Then again, even with this, there are other factors involved. So the ambient temperature, when it's getting hotter, the repellent will evaporate more quickly. So you're going to have to apply it more often. Your level of activity makes a difference. If you're perspiring quite a bit, you're washing more of it off. So you're going to have to reapply more frequently. Have you hopped in a lake or a pool? Have you washed some of it off? And some people don't really notice until they start getting bitten again that it's time to reapply. Another little tidbit that I thought was interesting for people who wear sunscreen, I don't generally, but for people who wear sunscreen, to apply your sunscreen first before the bug repellent.
Also makes sense.
And supposedly if it's an EPA registered chemical like these two, then it's safe for children and pregnant women. But he really emphasizes read the labels. As with any product, just reading the labels being important for you as far as, if you have any known allergy reactions or skin sensitivities or respiratory issues, you may want to be really careful with these chemicals. So hopefully, maybe as we leave the mosquito season in some parts of the world, I know some of our listeners are just really getting into mosquito season soon. So hopefully this will give people some thoughts around if you have experienced being a mosquito magnet, some things that you might consider doing to help curb that. Direct sun, high heat, middle of the day. That's where you'll see me now.
Yes, very interesting. And very interesting to me personally, because I am also a mosquito magnet. I always have been. And actually, this time of year is here in the UK where I am, is quite often bad for mosquitoes because we've had quite a lot of rain. So it's quite wet everywhere and increased humidity, but it's still warm. Mm-hmm. So perfect conditions for mosquitoes, basically. In fact, my bedroom window is always open to let some air in. And I'd left the light on in there and I went in and they were all like swirling around the light. I actually got my vacuum cleaner out. They weren't moving a lot and I managed to vacuum them all up, which was a result. But I've always had a problem. They're not crazy bad in the UK. I've always suffered greatly from them in Thailand. My father moved to Thailand when I was 10, 11. So many decades ago. And in fact, the first time I went to Thailand, I think I was 11, the first time I went. And I used to go every summer. So was a frequent visitor there. And mosquitoes are dire there. Really, really, really bad. Everyone has mosquito screens. And, my dad moved a few times. But yeah, one of his flats was terrible. And I used to count them. I would have like 50 bites on one leg. I was forever applying, putting ice cubes on them. It used to drive me round the bend. And I probably still got some scars from, because I'm a dreadful scratcher. I can't stop myself scratching. In fact, I read something the other day and I forget what the advice was, but it was supposed to work. I have a feeling it was applying extreme heat. I can't remember. It wasn't sort of what I would typically think of. And there was a period of time, there was one of the summers that I went over, because I used to go, usually my summer holidays were the longest school holidays, so that was the time that I generally went. And it's always humid in Thailand anyway, but in the summer it was monsoon season, so even more humid. And there was one particular year I went, I can't remember the name of the disease, but it was carried by mosquitoes and it was potentially fatal. It was really bad. It was a blood disease, so it was transmitted by the mosquitoes, and it inspired great fear in me. I was always convinced I was potentially going to come home with rabies, because that's always there, and I'm a shocker for, I can't not pet little stray kitten and get saliva on me, and then you've got something, I can't remember the period of time that it takes for rabies to show up, and then basically if you haven't had injections you're going to die. So I was always panicked for the 3 months or whatever it was, but this inspired such fear, because you would get it from a mosquito bite. And the initial symptoms were sort of flu, cold-like symptoms. So the advice given was things like, taking paracetamol and dropping fever and things like that, which would actually advance the disease. And it ended up, if they caught it early enough, but the trick was in recognizing it. Of course, once a few people were getting it, they started to become more aware. My father drilled into me, if these things happen, you've got to go to the hospital for infectious diseases in London. Don't go to your GP, go there. But what happened once you got past a certain point, you started getting blood coming out of you, basically. So it might start with a little nosebleed, little things like that again wouldn't necessarily, until there was more awareness, inspire great fear. Nothing out of the ordinary, until it was so bad, by which time there was nothing they could do for you. Blood would come out of your pores. That's how you died, from blood loss. And this was killing people. I mean, I'm sure there was at least one person in his office that died from this. It was terrible. I mean, obviously, once there was more awareness, this was happening and they took certain steps. But of course, I was terrified when I got back to the UK. I was real heightened awareness. But so I've always been very aware of mosquitoes. One, because they're attracted to me. And then that still inspires fear in me, that that period of time. So, tricky. I think, and I've never really figured out what it is about me. I've always had that, oh yeah, I've got the sweet blood that they love. But prevention has always been the best method. And the new place he moved into, it must have much better mosquito screens and things. The last time I went, which was actually quite a long time ago, it's about a decade ago now, but the last time I went, I hardly had any bites. And yes, the problem with those ones that were transmitting these diseases were that they were not like the normal ones, actually, in that they were around more during the day, but they were in the shady places. So that became the advice, to avoid the shady places during the day. But yes, that dusk was always the worst period of time, dusk, and it gets dark very quickly, very suddenly, sort of 6 p.m. It's near the equator, so it just happens like that. And yeah, they have the little incense things under all the tables, and I never knew how much they helped. I always seem to get bitten. And then the other problem for me is always, I can't bear really strong smells, so I've never liked using these products. I did find a product in France, which was it looked like a deodorant, sort of like a smear-on thing that didn't smell. So I'm not sure if I've still got it hanging around. I'm really interested to go and look it up and see if because it was a new product around about that time. So I wonder if it had this ingredient in it that you mentioned, maybe. But the only other thing I think is better for them is the sea air. I don't feel like there are as many mosquitoes by the sea. I don't know if that's in my imagination, but I have a feeling the breezes and the salt air, there are less here than there are where I used to live, much more when I used to live in the UK all the time. I used to live much more centrally, where the air didn't move around as much, maybe more humid. And I think there were more, I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe the sea air helps as well. But I've had the odd mosquito bite this year, but probably not more than half a dozen in total.
I'm wondering for you, Daisy.
And I don't drink beer.
No. Are other bug bites also more problematic for you? So my friends and I were on a long bike ride climbing a mountain. So, we're not in a shady area. We're not at dusk or dawn. And there were, I think maybe might be horse flies. And again, everyone came home with at least one bite. I had like 12 on one leg. It was ridiculous how many I had. So I'm not only a mosquito magnet, but any bug bites. And maybe it was last year or the year before, I don't remember, when we went to Costa Rica, I got bitten by no-see-ums. And I mean, it's just going to sound like I'm ridiculously over-exaggerating, but I probably had 200 to 250 bites on my body. It was the most insane thing. And nothing would make them stop itching.
What are those?
Those little bugs that you can't see, the no-see-ums, but they bite.
Just like little midges or something.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad. I just had little dots all over my body. It was so difficult. And of course, for me, it's like, oh my gosh, did I get bed bugs? Did I get this? And then all of a sudden there were just so many of them. There was no way. And then it just made me miserable. Like everywhere we went, we would be sitting eating at dusk and I would be getting more bites. And I think some of them you didn't feel while they were biting you. So I'm like, okay, that wasn't that bad. And then a couple hours later, we seriously had to go to a pharmacia and get tubes of stuff for me to just coat my body with to try to manage the itching. So not only a mosquito magnet, but a no-see-um magnet and a horsefly magnet and just about any other biting insect imaginable.
So maybe it is a kind of general thing. Yes, horseflies are a problem. Luckily, don't get too many of them here, but they used to be terrible where I lived in France. I think it was probably the cows, because it tends to be where there are livestock, doesn't it, that they're really bad, I guess, hence the name. I assume that's got something to do with the name, apart from the fact that they're just huge bloody things. But yes, I remember those, walking the dogs in France. I think they were probably worse in the evenings. They're weird though, aren't they? In that weird and in some ways easier to kill because they're slow. They fly around slowly, but they're really tricky because unlike mosquitoes that you can actually take preventative action with clothing, can't you? But horseflies just sting through anything. They can sting through jeans. So I used to walk up and down the road, moving my t-shirt, like this. So the listeners can't tell, but I'm moving it around. So it was moving between my skin. So if there was something trying to go through my t-shirt and bite my skin, just the action of me moving my t-shirt around would dislodge it. Because yes, they have to be the worst bites. I expect you probably come up as badly as I do, but they're not like little itchy mosquito bites or anything else bites. They come up as great, big, nasty, painful, and itchy.
I get huge welts with many of my different bites, and even mosquito bites. When I was a kid, they would get so big. Other people get a mosquito bite, they're standing next to me and they slap their arm, they get a mosquito bite, and it's just like this little dot. And for me, it's like an inch in diameter.
Oh, wow.
And they're just like raised lumps. And then when I was a kid, they would turn into big blisters.
Oh my God.
So definitely I need to find a bubble to live in, I think, when I go to these places. So I'm already shopping now after listening to this episode. I'm shopping because we're going to Mexico to warm weather in October. And so I'm like, I am taking some of these chemicals with me. I refuse to spend my vacation battling the bites again.
Well, that second one sounds better. I just can't use anything on my skin that's like, it's one of the reasons I don't use sunscreen for all the other reasons that we probably share. But I also don't like the smell, and I don't like the greasy feel of it all over me either. And that's a similar thing usually with these mosquito repellents. Like I say, this one that I found that it's not really a roll-on, it's a smear-on. You know, that kind of deodorant that you sort of smear on? It was completely odorless. And so that is the kind of thing that I would use, I think, whatever chemical it had in it.
Yeah, I'm looking at one that is this picaridin insect repellent, and unless they put other things in it, it is supposedly the chemical itself odorless and doesn't have the greasy formula that DEET
Great,
has.
that appeals to me.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the one. So you can trial that for us. When you go to Mexico, you can trial it and report back.
Absolutely.
A, is it tolerable to wear? And B, does it work?
That's right. That's right.
Well, your weird sort of different subjects certainly appealed to me. I found it very interesting. Something.
And we came across another similarity that we share.
Yep. We're mosquito magnets. Very, very tasty.
Absolutely.
Little bar stewards. There's, I don't know if I need to Google no-see-ums. I don't know if midges aren't no-see-um. You can see them, but they're very small. Scotland is absolutely plagued by midges. Particular times of year, it's especially bad. And it's one of the reasons I certainly couldn't live there, and I probably wouldn't go on holiday when they were around, because I know it would just ruin it for me. But there's this one product which I've never tried, and I know it has a strong odor, so I wouldn't like. But do you have Avon there? Is Avon just a British thing, or is it an American thing as well?
I don't know if we still have it. We certainly did for many years.
Yeah. Well, there's a product by Avon. I think it's a moisturizer, and it's got nothing to do with, it's not a mosquito repellent, but it garnered a reputation for being a very effective mosquito repellent, even though it wasn't marketed as such, and is very popular because of that. But again, I never used it because it was scented. Even the natural ones like citronella, they're still too scented for me. So yeah, you can try the odorless one.
I remember that. It was Avon Skin So Soft that you could spray on.
That's the one.
When I was a kid, we would spray that on before going on long bike rides because we didn't want to get the horsefly bites. Yeah.
It was effective, apparently. I was about to say I didn't realise it had been around that long, but then I realised that was probably a bit offensive. Back to the prehistoric days. Before mobile phones.
We just used Avon Skin So Soft.
Oh dear. Okay. Thank you for a very entertaining episode. I enjoyed that very much. Until I see you next time, I hope you and everyone at home has a mosquito-free and a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.